Hello and welcome back to another fantasy football video. I hope everyone's doing fantastically well. Here today with an essentials video. Today I'm going to be splitting up into three sections. Those players who are cusp of essential, those players who could be essential, and those players who are essential. What do I mean by that? Cusp of essential are those players after a couple of game weeks I think could really push on and get into the essentials bracket. Could be essential, those players who probably differentials at the minute, but at some point in the season could well go and push on to be essential. And then finally, those players going into Game Week 1 who actually are essential in my eyes anyway. So, firstly, taking a look at the first player for the cusp of essentials bracket, and that's Bakayo Saka of Arsenal. A little bit of a debate around that 8 million spot over who is the best player. For me, I actually do think it is Saka. Now, the main thing for me at the minute is the fact that Saka is most likely going to be on penalties. There is a little bit of a debate there, obviously, with Jesus coming in, but Manchester City didn't have the best penalty taking record themselves, and Jesus wasn't exactly the best on penalties either. So I'd be surprised if Saka does get the penalties taken away from him. He was the penalty taker towards the back end of last season and has taken one in pre-season as well. And he could even outscore Jesus in the first few game weeks. He obviously gets that extra point for scoring a goal and gets the extra point as well for keeping a clean sheet. And obviously the fixtures that Arsenal do have are very, very nice. He also was pretty much essential towards the back end of last season. I think the main thing to actually how we describe essential is if you don't own them, how much does it negatively impact your team? And with some of Saka's fixtures, if his ownership does creep up from 20 to about 30%, then I would consider him essential, especially when we get into those kind of that Bournemouth game, into the Fulham game, into the Aston Villa game. I think you'd be very hard pressed not to own Saka. So moving on into the second player is Ivan Perisic of Spurs. Now, he is one that's sort of creeping his way actually into the essentials bracket. There's a lot of hype around him recently. Obviously, he got a good amount of minutes in pre-season against AS Roma. Before that, we hadn't really seen him. Obviously, he is a very, very attacking player, coming in as 5.5 million, priced as a defender with an expected goal contribution of 0.44. If we do see him get consistent minutes, then I definitely think he'll comfortably be moved into that essentials bracket. But I think at the minute it's fair to put him just below because we don't really know what is going to be happening with him. And I wouldn't say it is essential to have him going into Game Week 1. Obviously that Southampton game does look very, very nice, but then they play Chelsea and he may not even play in that game. And it is a fair amount to put into a player that you could potentially be benching in that second game week. It's probably the most comfortable call for me to make that Perisic will be essential if we see him get consistent minutes, because there's no doubt that he's going to get himself on the score sheet a few times and potentially get a few assists this season. It's just whether he does get these consistent minutes, and not necessarily just about starting, but does he get pulled off at half time? Does he get pulled off at the 50th minute? Is he maybe sat on the bench and then comes on for the last half an hour of the game? And that is all just a wait and see. But Perisic definitely does stand a chance of being essential throughout this season. Then moving on into our third player here, slash players, and that is Robertson and Diaz. I've kind of grouped these two guys together because it's really that third Liverpool spot that we're all debating at the minute. Do we go for Diaz or do we go for Robertson? Diaz being the 8 million midfielder and Robertson being that 7 million defender. I do actually think it's pretty essential to own at least one of them in your team. With that Fulham away game starting and the fixtures that Liverpool have after that, I think we'll very comfortably see at least one of these guys moving into the essential bracket. It's just which one do you pick? For me personally, I think Robertson pips it. He will get the consistent minutes. Obviously, with Mane going and Jota now injured, it does look like Diaz will start most of the games towards the start of the season. However, I did see a stat the other day that was something like in the past 14 away games that Robertson has played, he's only blanked once or twice in the last 14 away games, and that Fulham away game definitely sets him up very nicely to potentially even get an assist. Robertson coming in with an expected goal contribution of 0.3 and Diaz doubling that at 0.6, but then Robertson does also have the bonus of getting the clean sheet points and is pretty good for bonus points generally. Like if they keep a clean sheet, he's likely to tick up and potentially get 1 or even 2 bonus points, whereas Diaz, with Salah potentially getting on the score sheet as well, will most likely have to at least get more than 1 contribution to be potentially getting on the bonus points. But I think both look like fantastic options and could easily push themselves into the essentials bracket. Robertson, I'm a little bit surprised at how low his ownership is. It's creeping up to like 11-12%, but still a little bit surprised at how low he is. I currently own Robertson. That's the player that I'm going for, and I think he looks like a and I think he looks like a pretty decent pick for the start of the season. Moving on into our fourth pick, and it is Rhys James of Chelsea. Now, as you can see by his ownership, he's very, very close to actually being considered essential. 40% ownership, as I say, he could have a massively negative impact if you do not own him. With that being said, I still think it's a little bit up in the air as to how good Rhys James is actually going to be. Will Chelsea play a 4 at the back? Will they play a 5 at the back? Will James play in the right centre-back position, in the 5 at the back? Will he play consistent minutes? Obviously, if he's fit and ready to go, he most likely will be starting every single game. But I remember owning him last season, and I hardly got any points from him because he was consistently injured, and what we want to see from the main man is him getting consistent minutes. So for me, I actually currently don't own him for that very reason. I want to see him getting consistent minutes before I do move on him. Now, for that first game of the season against Everton away, it probably is one of the better times to pick him because, you know, he hasn't got injured so far. He hasn't got injured so far in pre-season, so we pretty much know that he will start in that game. Everton looking a little bit depleted. Frank Lampard has just come out and said that Calvert-Lewin is injured, so not looking particularly good for them. Rhys James could really take advantage of that and at least get himself a clean sheet. Rhys James definitely one that I'm keeping an eye on, and with Chelsea's good fixtures in the opening sort of even 10 game weeks, they've got a very nice set of fixtures. He could be one that is moved on very quickly from a lot of people and becomes essential. Move on into the fifth player, and we take a look at the 12 million midfielder. The main man, Sonny, he only did actually score 7 less points than Salah last season. And if you take your mind back a few seasons ago to when they played Southampton, he ended up scoring 4 goals. So that first game against Southampton is looking very, very nice. An ownership of around 26%. He will definitely punish you if you don't own him. Not to the degree of some of the other players that we're going to go on to talk about. But Son, if he managed to pick up some of the form that he found towards the back end of last season, or even throughout, to be fair, the main part of this season, then he could yet again become essential. A lot of people are obviously going for the premium forwards instead of the midfielders. I think you can probably create a little bit more of a more balanced squad by doing that. But if Son managed to find that form, it would be very hard not to pick him, and he could easily become essential once again. Then moving on into the final cast of essential player, and it is Kevin De Bruyne. KDB having a nice little pre-season, picking up a couple of goals on 16% ownership. So at the minute, he'd punish you a little bit if you didn't own him, but not massively so. Probably only really by the people who captained him. He didn't really hit the heights of a couple of seasons ago when he was priced a little bit cheaper at sort of 9 million mark. At that sort of 9 million mark, we do know that KDB is an absolute bonus point magnet. So once he gets an assist, he's very likely to actually get on the bonus points. Even when Manchester City end up scoring a fair few goals. Not got the best of fixtures to start with. However, after that, they do play against Bournemouth and have a very, very good run in after that. And now with the new main man up front, Harland, hopefully he can get a few of those crosses in and Harland can get himself on the end of them. And KDB will obviously be, keeping his hand out, looking for those runs through that Harland's going to make. So I think KDB looks like a very good option. Will he be essential at any point this season? Potentially, if we get to the double game week point and, and Manchester City have a nice double game week, I think we're more likely to see the likes of Son potentially being essential than KDB. But KDB does stand a chance, to be fair to him, so we'll wait and see what happens. Next, moving on to those players you wouldn't necessarily think of as being essential, and that's exactly it. I've tried to pick some more differential players, and at points this season, their ownership could go up, so they could really negatively affect you if you don't own them. The first one I've gone for here is Mason Mount of Chelsea. Now, he got 169 points last season, and he didn't get really, really consistent minutes. He played a fair amount, but he was brought off a few times, didn't start all of the games, and so I think if we do see him get consistent minutes, as I've mentioned with a lot of these players, it's about them getting consistent minutes that will kind of make or break whether they are good FPL options. Playing against Everton away, it does look like he will most likely start in this game. Only 10% ownership at the minute, and so he can be considered as a nice little differential pick. If they do end up playing that 4 at the back, which they well might because Chelsea haven't got the centre-back signings that they've been looking for over the summer, then it's much more likely that Mount will be playing week in, week out. And so Mason Mount, for me, at a point in the season, stands a chance of getting himself into the essential bracket. As I say, obviously, if he does get those consistent minutes. Next, we've gone for an even more differential pick, and that is Wilfred Zaha. A lot of people not really going for him at the start of the season. I think rightly so, because of the fixtures the Crystal Palace do have. Playing against Manchester City and Liverpool in their first 5, when you chuck in the likes of Arsenal in there as well, it really isn't the greatest of start for them. But when they do pick up a good run of fixtures, I think it could be very good for Zaha. Patrick Vieira obviously coming into his second season as the boss. They've upgraded their squad a little bit, and Wilfred Zaha, the main thing for me why I put him in here is that he will be on penalties for Crystal Palace. He scored 14 goals last season. It was a very good season from him, and he'll want to continue on that form and keep on picking up goals. Coming in at 150 points, once they do get a good run of fixtures, I think a lot of people may start to look to him if he has been on some good form. And as I say, players being on penalties is absolutely massive. They can be having an awful game, but then, someone can win a penalty. They can step up, they can score, they can take home all 3 bonus points, and it doesn't really matter. So it's absolutely massive to look out for those things in FPL, which is why I put Zaha in here. And at some point in the season, maybe not, maybe for like a 5 game week period, we may see his ownership absolutely fly, and it could very negatively impact you if you don't own him for that period. Next, the third player that we are taking a look at here is Diogo Dallow. Now, we're obviously yet to see the impact that Ten Hag is going to have on that Manchester United side. Will they be better going forward? Will they be better at the back? Or will they just be completely worse, or just in the same position that they were previously? What I like about Dallow is that he comes in at a nice budget, 4.5 million. So if we do see that Manchester United have improved quite a bit in the defence, then I think he'll be a lovely enabler to hop on. I think a lot of people will start to hop on him. He was also very good last season when he did play for the bonus points, and it seems as though Saka has definitely lost out in terms of that right back spot. So I think we'll see him play consistent minutes. It is a little bit of a wait and see for me, but once Manchester United proves themselves to be a better side under Ten Hag, and they pick up a few nice fixtures, I think Dallow can definitely be one to watch out for. Then the final player of this kind of differentials bracket is the main man himself, Jesse Lingard, freshly signed for Nottingham Forest. Now, last season, obviously only picking up 29 points with an expected goal contribution of 0.33. Now, the main thing that we are remembering here is the season that Jesse Lingard played for West Ham. Came a little bit out of the blue, played in that number 10 position and absolutely smashed it. And I would definitely argue that for that period of the season, he was pretty essential to own. Now, Forest don't have the best of starting fixtures. I think that 6 million is a very, very nice price for him. But once we get to about game week 6, Lingard and Forest have some very nice fixtures. And if he can prove that, he can pick up a couple of attacking contributions up to that point, I think a lot of people will start moving on to him. And he could, I would say, move into that sort of next level of sort of being on the cusp of essential. If he goes up to about 20% ownership, you may lose out if you don't own him. And, if he's playing very well, I think easily a player that could become essential. As I said, in that West Ham season, he was definitely a player who was pretty essential, as those people who didn't own him were losing out quite a bit. Then moving on into the main guys, the absolute essentials that I feel for going into game week 1 that you just need to have. We're starting it off here with Gabriel Jesus coming in at 73.1% ownership. It kind of just speaks for itself, to be honest. You just can't you can't not go for the guy, because if he does well, you're just absolutely screwed if you do not own him. Coming in at 8 million, he looks like an absolutely lovely price. Had an absolutely smashing pre-season, banging in 7 goals. Crystal Palace away is their first fixture. Not the best, but also not the worst. They lost 3-0 there last season at Selhurst Park. But now, with a little bit of a new freshened team, obviously Jesus coming in himself, you could easily see him going and banging. And yeah, for me, it's just the ownership just speaks for itself. A 73.1% is just quite incredible. Next, taking a look at the main man himself, Mohamed Salah of Liverpool, coming in at 13 million, scoring 265 points last season, with an expected goal contribution of 1.12. It is just a must own. For me, going into that first game week, he's going to be my captain probably for the first 5 game weeks even. He just does look like a must own, especially now with Mane gone. He is going to be their main attacking output. And yeah, not too much to say on Salah, other than I think he's a fantastic option and will be my captain going into game week 1. Next, moving into another player who I think is going to have a fantastic start to the season, and that is Trent Alexander-Arnold, coming for Liverpool, playing in that right back position. looks pretty decent. Obviously managed to pick up a goal in that Community Shield and just looking very good coming into this season. With a lot of these essential players, I don't really have too much to say other than I just think they're absolutely cracking options and aren't really players that you can go without just because of the attacking output that they provide. But also with players like Trent, he's able to get the attacking points, he's able to get the bonus points, and then the clean sheets is almost like a little cherry on top for him. And also this season, it's a lot easier to pick the better teams because the better teams, like the Manchester City, like the Liverpool, like the Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea even, they've all got the better fixtures at the start of the season. So very much going more towards the sort of premium teams is just the way it's going to be this season. So Trent coming in at 7.5 million is essential for me. Then the fourth option for me is going to be Yao Cancelo. And it's a little bit more debatable as to whether Cancelo is essential for me. The ownership does just ticking him over into that essentials mark because of the potential that he does have in that Manchester City side, potential of scoring, potential of picking up clean sheets, potential of getting assists on top of the bonus points. I do think you'll be very sort of negatively impacted if you don't get him. And you may think, you can cover him with Kyle Walker, you can maybe cover him with Diaz as well. But you got to think back last season, Diaz managed to pick up 140 points. That's 60 points less than Cancelo. Walker managed to pick up 85. Now, obviously, Walker didn't play for the majority of last season, and he could be a very good pick this season, considering it's 5 million. They don't really have another right back. However, Cancelo, for me, with the attacking threat that he does pose for Manchester City and the ownership, the points he managed to pick up last season, it all just leads to him going into the start of the season. It's a safer pick, I will say that, but I do think it is one that is essential as well. Final player / players is Harry Kane and Erling Harland. Now I've put both of them in here just because it is that debate for that attacking position. Do you go for Kane to start with? Do you go for Harland? Harland obviously arguably a little bit more essential because of the ownership. However, for me personally, I think I'm actually leaning towards Kane a little bit more for that first fixture against Southampton. I do think that he is going to do particularly well. If you can leave yourself a little bit of money in the bank to potentially make that move to Harland for that second game week for Bournemouth, then I think that is a good little strategy to have. However, out of the two, if we're looking for the first sort of 5 to 10 game weeks, then personally I would be going to Harland because, maybe Kane outscores him in the Southampton game, but then we get to the Bournemouth game and Harland is clearly the favourite in that game. And then going forward, Manchester City do have arguably better fixtures and will probably give better supply to Harland than Kane will necessarily get. That is saying nothing really against Spurs, but obviously Manchester City, one of the favourites to win the league yet again. The creative output that they do have, they're most likely just going to be putting the ball on a plate for Erling Haaland. Got a couple of stats here. Obviously, Harland didn't pick up any points last season because he wasn't in the Premier League. But for Borussia Dortmund, he managed to pick up an expected goal contribution of 1.08, which is pretty impressive and similar to the likes of Salah. Kane last season picking up an expected goal contribution of 0.85, obviously in the Premier League, potentially against tougher opposition as well. Both are fantastic picks. Both are good picks for the start of the season. I do also think a little bit to think about is that Harland more likely to receive price rises if he does end up doing well in game week 1. So that is something to think about if your strategy is to have Kane for that first game week, but then move to Harland for the second game week. Have a little think because you may not have that 0.1 million that you so desperately need, and I wouldn't say taking a -4 is the greatest thing to do. But both looking like good options. Obviously Harland maybe a little bit more essential at the minute because of the ownership. As I say, both good options. If you have enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well if you don't mind, and yeah, thank you for watching. Cheers, we'll see you later.